So there are two different, slightly different types of these ramekin jars. This is the standard goo one, where the cheesecake and stuff comes in, and as you can see it's got a slightly tapered side. This one, this is also goo. I think it's for creme caramel, which they don't do anymore, but Bon Maman, here's one. This has got some beads in, and some of the own make supermarkets, they also do a very similar jar with the straight sides as opposed to the tapered sides. So the good news is that the pattern only needs a very slight modification to fit these slightly different jars. So for the purpose of this video, I will be making a beaded tea light cover for this standard goo jar with the tapered sides. So the first thing you need to do is prepare the number of beads you need. So for the standard size beaded tea light cover, you'll need about 125 beads. So it is a good idea to count these out and have them separate, and then you will need to thread them onto your yarn before you start crocheting. So I'm using here these Must Have Minis yarn and colours, which is a 4-ply yarn. You don't have to use the mini balls, you can use a standard sized ball or skein of yarn, but the only thing is you must thread the beads on first. So the problem is that the yarn, being 4-ply, is quite thick, so you won't be able to use a needle to thread these on because there simply won't be enough room to get the thread through the hole in the bead. So these are a size 8 bead, but you can always also use a size 6, which should fit. As long as you get quite a good quality bead where the holes are consistent size, you shouldn't have a problem. So what I like to do first is get a candle on the go. You can use your tea light, but I do find that a normal wax candle works much better, because what you need to do is create a kind of needle on the end of your yarn. So I'm going to just cut off until I get to a straight bit, and if you can try and cut it at an angle so that it matches the twist of the yarn, that also helps. And then you're going to very carefully, without catching fire to it, so this is a bit of a fire hazard, so you need to be careful, dip it into the wax without catching fire to it. You can blow it out as well if you want to be on the safe side. And you probably need about 1 inch in the wax, and then twist the end whilst sort of smoothing the wax, because what you're trying to do is create a kind of needle. So keep twisting and smoothing. You don't really want too much wax on there. You're just trying to create a sort of needle that is going to fit through the whole of the bead. Sometimes it's quite easy to accidentally flatten the end instead of making it nice and pointy. So I'm just going to keep squeezing and shaping that. You don't really want too much excess wax on there, otherwise it's not going to go through the needle. You can also use your you can also light a tea light and do it. The problem with the tea lights is they vary massively in quality. Well, I suppose with candles really. These Prices ones are quite good because they're quite a good quality tea light. Some of the other tea lights, such as the IKEA ones, they are very sort of, well, they are made out of paraffin, so they can be a bit sort of like Vaseline, and they never really go properly hard. Whereas as you can see with this proper wax, it does go quite hard. But even if you've just got a tea light, like one of these, it should be fine. And I think I'm happy with that. And then I'm going to start getting my beads. So this is the bit that's a bit time consuming, because you've got to thread all of these on by hand. I tend to do a couple at a time. I've got wax under my fingernails. Probably should have left that a bit longer to should have left it a bit longer to go hard, but it should be okay. So I'm just going to go ahead now and carry on threading all of my beads onto my yarn so that I can start crocheting. If you find that you damage the end of your wax needle, you can try shaping it again by squeezing and sort of shaping it with your fingers, or you can just cut it off and start again with some fresh wax, but that's entirely up to you. That's also the benefit of using real wax. Got it all under my fingernails. As opposed to the paraffin wax, you can kind of remelt and fix your wax needle just using your heat from your fingers. If you're using paraffin wax, it's not quite as forgiving and you often have to chop it off and start again. Anyway, I'm going to carry on with beading these, and I'll see you back in a minute when I've done all of them. So I've just finished threading all the beads I need on here, and I always add on a couple more just to make sure. And now I'm ready to start crocheting. So I'm actually going to cut off that little wax needle. I don't need that anymore. And I'm using a 2.5mm crochet hook. So the first few rounds, i.e. the base of the holder, here's an example here, is there isn't any beading, it's just crochet. But we want the beads on there ready for when we do the beaded mesh section. So we're going to start off with a slip knot loop on our hook, and we're going to chain 7. Then we're going to join in the first chain with a slip stitch to form a ring. Then we're going to chain 3, which is going to count as 1 double crochet, and then into the ring we're going to make 19 double crochets, or that's a UK treble. To keep moving the beads along. So remember, a UK treble or a US double is yarn over into the stitch, or in this case the ring, pull up a loop. You've got 3 on your hook, yarn over, draw off 2, yarn over, draw off 2. Let's go ahead and make 19. So what we're aiming for is a total of 20, including our chain 3, which is counting as a stitch. At the same time, I'm crocheting over the top of my tail end. You don't have to worry about that, but I just like to do that because it saves me a job later on. Just check I've got 20 a minute. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19, I need 20, including my chain 3. So at the end of round 1 we are going to join with a slip stitch into the 3rd chain of our beginning chain 3. So we've got the chain 3 at the start, we've got 1, 2, 3, so it's this. Make sure you go through the front loop and the back loop, shoot the chain like a normal stitch and pull a loop through and then pull that through the live loop on your hook to make a slip stitch. So you should have 20 stitches in total. You're counting your chain 3 as a stitch. Round 2 we're going to chain 4. Now that is going to count as a double crochet and a chain 1 space. Now in every single stitch we are going to put 1 double crochet or a UK treble and a chain 1. Into the next stitch, UK treble, US double, chain 1, US double, UK treble, chain 1. So all the way around, moving your beads along. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will meet you back. Coming up to the end of the row, I'm going to put 1 more double, chain 1, and join with a slip stitch into the 3rd chain of my beginning chain 4. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Remember, this is sort of vertical at the minute, so we need to spin it round so we get the front loop, back loop. We're going to join with a slip stitch, so pull the yarn through that chain stitch and then also through the loop on the hook. In total you should have 20 stitches and 20 chain 1 spaces, so you're counting your starting chain as a stitch 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now let's move on to round 3. So the first thing we're going to do is slip stitch into the first chain 1 space. Then we're going to chain 3, and that is going to count as 1 UK treble or a US double crochet. Then we're going to put another double crochet or UK treble into the same space. Then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to put 2 double crochets or UK trebles, 2 UK trebles into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, and again putting US double crochets, 2 UK trebles, 2 into each space, and separate them each with a chain 1. So 2 stitches, chain 1 to each space. Remember to move your beads. 2 stitches, chain 1. So I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way around, and I'll see you back in a minute. Almost finished. Last set of 2 doubles or 2 UK trebles. I'm going to chain 1, then I'm going to slip stitch into the 3rd chain of my beginning chain 3. 1, 2, 3, remembering to go through the front loop and through the back loop. Treat it like a normal stitch, don't go around the whole chain, it will make a hole. Slip stitch, so you're pulling up a loop, pulling it through that chain stitch and then through the loop on your hook. So in total you should have another 20 chain 1 spaces, chain 1 spaces, and then you should have 40 double crochets or UK trebles. We're now going to do the final row of the base, the final round of the base. This is just a single crochet, which is a UK double, all the way around. So we're going to chain 1, and from now on we are only working in the back loops. So even this very first stitch we need to work into, which if you remember was the chain 3 from the previous round, we are only going to work into the back loop of that, even though we've already got a slip stitch in there. So back loop only. we're going to single crochet, which is a UK double. So just a reminder for that, remember we're going into the back loop only. We get into the stitch, we don't do any yarn over or anything. Go into the stitch and we pull up a loop. We've got 2 on the hook. We yarn over and we draw off 2. That is a single crochet, which is known as a UK double. And even the chains, we are only going into the back loop. We're just treating that just like a normal stitch. Back loop, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw off 2. So continue round like that. You're putting 1 single crochet into every single stitch, back loop only. Remember, you're still moving your beads, but don't worry because we'll be using them soon. It does feel like you've carried them a long way. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to carry on putting 1 single crochet in the back loop of each stitch, or if you're using British terminology, that's a UK double crochet. And I'll see you in a minute. We're coming up to the end of this round. And I now need to join with a slip stitch in the first single crochet that I made. So go through both loops of the stitch, front and back, pull up a loop, pull that same loop through the live loop on your live loop on your hook. Okay, in total you should have 60 single crochets. This is reasonably important because the mesh stitch is a 3-stitch pattern repeat, so whatever you end up with here needs to be divisible by 3 for the stitch to fit in. So this is good for this ramekin. You can see that it fits perfectly. There's also a bit of stretch in there, so even if it's a smidge too small, it doesn't really matter. It's actually better for it to be a tiny bit too small, because it doesn't look very good if it's baggy. It does look better when it's stretched tight across the ramekin because it opens up the mesh a bit better and allows more light from your Tealight to come out. Now we're ready to do the beaded mesh. So we're going to chain 1 and then we're going to turn the work to the wrong side. Now this is because the way I'm doing the beading, it puts the bead on the wrong side of the work. So if we're working on the right side of the work, the beads are all going to be on the inside of the ramekin, which is no good. So I've chained 1, I've turned my work, and then I'm going to make a beaded single crochet. So I'll show you how to do that. This very first stitch is a slight anomaly because we are going straight back into the spot where we did a slip stitch. So it does feel a bit weird because you're sort of going in a bit more to the right than you normally would. So have a look, you can see there, that's where that slip stitch is coming out of, in that stitch there. I'm going to go back into that stitch. So I put my hook in the stitch, I'm going to pull up a loop. I have now got 2 loops on my hook. At this point I need to draw in a bead. I need to draw in 1 bead and I need to hold it to the back of the work as close as I can to the stitches there that I've sort of partially made. Then I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull that loop through both loops on the hook. So I've made a single crochet, and in the process I've trapped that little bead in the back there. Now I'm going to start the chain for the mesh, which is chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to skip 2 stitches and I'm going to make another beaded single crochet, or if you're using UK terminology that's a beaded double crochet. Into the stitch, pull up a loop. So you got to keep everything quite well controlled here. Go and get yourself another bead. And hold that to the back of the work, the stitch that you're making right now. Yarn over, draw off the 2 loops on the hook. And again, what you see is you've made another single crochet and you've trapped the bead there on the other side of the work, which, because we flipped it over, is actually the right side of the work. Chain 4. Skip 2 stitches, go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, 2 loops on the hook, draw in a bead, hold it to the back, yarn over, draw off 2 loops on the hook. You've trapped another bead in your single crochet or UK double. Chain 4, skip 2, beaded single crochet, chain 4, skip 2, make a partial single crochet, hold the bead at the back, yarn over, draw off all 2 loops, chain 4, skip 2, pull up a loop, draw in a bead, hold it to the back, yarn over, draw off the 2 loops on the hook. So hopefully you get the hang of that. It's pretty straightforward. Starts off feeling a bit fiddly. Once you get a good rhythm going, it can actually be pretty quick. And it's quite nice seeing the build up of beads. Let's have a quick look what we've done here. You can see them here all on the back. These little tubes, these types of beads are quite sweet. You can use round ones. These just happen to be what I've had. I think it was from a beaded shawl I made years ago. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to carry on all the way around, and I'll come back when I come close to finishing this round, because there's something a little bit special, a little bit different that we need to do at the end of each beaded mesh round. So I'll see you in a minute. So I've only got a little bit to do now. Skip 2, and there should be when you've made the last beaded single crochet or beaded double crochet for UK terminology, you should have 2 empty stitches at the end of the round. So here we've got to end the round, but we need to end the round so that we land in the middle of a mesh section. So don't worry too much, it will make more sense once you've done it. So to do that, once you've got 2 chains left at the end of the round, 2 stitches left, you need to do two chains. Then you need to make a double crochet or a UK treble in the first single crochet of the round that you made. So as you can see, that mimics a chain 4, but it allows you to finish right in the middle of that arc of the mesh. Now let's do row 2 of the beaded mesh. We're going to chain 1 and then straight back into this exact same space that we've made here. We're going to make another beaded single crochet. So I've done a chain 1, I'm going back into that space, I'm pulling up a loop, I'm going to pull the bead to the back, I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to draw off the 2 loops on the hook. And there I've popped a beaded single crochet in the middle of that arch of that mesh stitch. And now we're just going to carry on in exactly the same way. We're going to chain 4, and then we're going to go do a beaded single crochet into this chain 4 space of the mesh from the previous row. So this is nice and easy now because you don't even have to count any stitches. You are just going into the next chain 4 space, pulling up a loop, and making a beaded single crochet. Chain 4, go into the next chain 4 space, pull up a loop, draw a bead to the back, yarn over, draw off both loops on the hook to make a beaded single crochet. Chain 4, beaded single crochet. So that's all you're doing. You're going to go all the way along in the same way. Chain 4, beaded single crochet in the chain 4 space. I'm going to meet you back when I'm coming up to the end of round 2. So I'm coming up to the end of mesh row 2, beaded mesh row 2. I'm coming into the last chain 4 space. Oops, so I'm going to make a beaded single crochet in there. And now I'm going to end this mesh round in exactly the same way as we did round 1. So we're going to chain 2. And we're going to double crochet into the first single crochet of the round that we made, so that we finish in the middle of that mesh section. So round 3 is exactly the same as round 2. Chain 1, make a beaded single crochet in the same space, chain 4, beaded single crochet in the next chain 4 space, and continue around until one chain 4 space remains. The final row of the mesh stitch is a sort of straightening off stitch that allows us to put on the elasticated band and also make the final trim. So it's more or less the same, it's just a slight change. So this is round 4 of the mesh stitch if you're making the small ramekin. So chain 1, go into the first space, pull up a loop, pull a bead to the back, catch it in your single crochet stitch. Now instead of a chain 4 you're going to do a chain 2 and then beaded single crochet, and carry on all the way along like that. Chain 2, beaded single crochet, chain 2, beaded single crochet, chain 2. So you get the hang of that, and I will meet you back at the end of this round. Coming up to the end of this final row of mesh stitch. So the last section we are going to do a full chain 2, and we're just going to join with a slip stitch into that first single crochet that we made. So you can see now it's starting to take on the shape much more of the ramekin. You have got a load of beads left, and these are the ones that will be putting on the final round. So now we are going to incorporate the elastic cuff, which is just an elastic band. So the trick is you need a band that fits around here with a bit of tension, but that isn't too wide. So this is probably about 3 millimeters and I think it's a 5 centimetre diameter one. It is best to try and use one of a similar colour, but to be honest it doesn't really show through that much. To attach the elasticated cuff, we need to turn our work back round the right side, so we're just going to push it through to the other side so that all the beads are showing on the right side. We're going to chain 1 and then we're going to turn the work round so that the beads are facing us. So this is pretty straightforward. It can feel a bit awkward to start with. All we're doing is we're going to crochet around it with a single crochet or a UK double. So you hold the elastic band to the inside of the work, sort of around the edge of the chain 2 section you've just done and near the start of the round. I'm going to make 1 single crochet or a UK double in exactly the same spot where I made that slip stitch. So it does feel a bit like you're going back on yourself to the right. And then I'm just holding the band towards the back and then I'm making a single crochet in that slip stitch. So I've caught the elastic band in the first stitch, and then in every chain 2 space I'm also going to make 2 single crochets, at the same time going round the back of the catching in the elastic band. So don't worry too much about the band twisting and stuff. This is why you don't really want a band that's too thick. If it's too thick you won't be able to crochet around it properly and it will peep through the stitches. So I've put 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets in the chain 2 space, and now I'm going to put 1 single crochet into that beaded single crochet whilst also crocheting around that elastic band. Two in each space. One in each single crochet. Oops, lost that. Two in each space. So I'm just going to carry on like that. Don't forget you've still got these beads you need to move along because we haven't finished with those yet. I'm going to carry on crocheting on this elasticated cuff onto the edge of my mesh stitch. 2 single crochet in each chain 2 space, 1 single crochet in each single crochet stitch. So I'll see you in a minute when I've finished doing that. I'm coming up to the end now. I've got 1 more single crochet. And I've got a couple more chain 2 spaces there. It does get pulled in a bit by the elastic, but that's kind of what you want really. That's to stop it slipping off the Tealight holder. Coming up to my last chain 2 space. And I'm going to finish with a slip stitch in the first single crochet that I made. So don't forget you had a little chain 1 there, which has kind of disappeared. So actually that is my first single crochet there. It's a bit tight. I'm just going to slip stitch into there. So here you can see I've crocheted in my elasticated cuff, which will help slip over the top of this little ridge. You get it on the straight one as well, stops the mesh sliding off. It also, because it sort of hooks over the ridge, it helps to pull the mesh out, open it up to let the most light out, and also open up the stitch nicely. So as you can see, you can occasionally see a bit of the rubber band, but from the front you can't really see it. Now I'm ready to make the final border, which is like a beaded trim. So I'm going to chain 1 I'm going to turn the work again to the wrong side because I'm going to do beaded single crochets, and as you know I need to do those on the wrong side, otherwise the beads will be on the inside of your Tealight. So I've chained one, I've turned the work, I'm going to work back into that stitch where I just did a slip stitch, and I'm going to do a beaded single crochet. So you can either do a beaded single crochet or a plain single crochet, so you can alternate. So let's say I do one beaded, and then in the next single crochet I do a plain, and in the next stitch I do a beaded. So that's up to you. The standard pattern for the smaller ramekin that has got I actually forgot to do that there, is actually alternating. So if you're following the standard pattern, you'll have enough beads threaded on there to alternate between a beaded single crochet and a normal single crochet. However, if you prefer, if you want something that's going to be a bit more sparkly, you can do a beaded single crochet for every single stitch. But remember, you just need to make sure you have put enough beads, additional beads on. So this is 60 stitches, 60 single crochets. So if you are doing every other stitch with a bead, you'll need 30. If you are going to upgrade to the fully beaded trim, you'll need another 30 beads threaded on before you start. So I think I actually want it to match this one, so I'm going to rip this out and I'm going to alternate like this, just putting in a beaded single crochet for every single stitch. I actually quite like the way these little tube ones, the way they sit inside the single crochet stitch. They kind of slant to one side. I don't know if you can see here, which gives it quite an attractive look. So I'm going to rip that out and start again, and I'll come back to you near the end of the round when I'm coming to show you how to fasten off. I'm going to cut the yarn, and I'm going to so you can either do a finish off with a slip stitch in the first single crochet of the round, so just make a slip stitch in that first stitch and then pull through the tail end and sew it in, or what I prefer is to make a sewn bind off. So to do that, I'm going to pull this live loop completely out, which is a bit tricky because this is quite a small needle and a thick yarn. And to do a invisible bind off or a sewn bind off, you're going to make a mock stitch. So you skip the first single crochet, you go into the next single crochet from front to back as if it was a normal crochet stitch. You pull it until it's about the same length, this thread here that you're working on, you're pulling it until it's about the same length as these other stitches, and then you can see where it comes out of the top of this last stitch you made. You're going to go down through that stitch, and you're just going to pull that tight till it matches. Thread that through the stitches for a couple of stitches, catch a leg, go back the other way, and trim that off. I've also got to trim this in because I was actually, annoyingly, there was a knot a knot in this yarn, which is ridiculous if you think it's a 10 gram mini ball of yarn. They can't even give you a full 10 grams without a knot in. It's pretty shocking, really. Anyway, I need to hide that end as well. Inside of here. Then we can see how it fits. Trim that off. As I said, you can see the elastic band, but on the right side it's barely visible. Alright, so this is actually for one of these straighter goo jars. So this has got extra rows. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 rows and then 1 row to straighten instead of 3 rows and 1 row to straighten. So now this can be a bit of a tight fit, but that's what you want. I'm going to have to hold that against my body to get it on. There we go. Just had to hold it up against my body so that one end didn't slip off as I was trying to put the other end on. Then yeah, just going to push that on so it matches the rim. And now you can see it's really nicely stretched open the stitches. To show off the mesh, if you like, you can readjust your beads, just make sure they are all round on the right side. Sometimes you can get one that pops round to the wrong side, but overall I'm pretty happy with that. You can put a little blob of wax in the middle if you like, just to stop these from moving around. So let them catch on a bit, and let's have a look what these look like in the dark. Easy if I show you one. You can see lovely effect you get from the mesh.